All right, hello lovely people. We're talking about how to find linguist quotes for VCE English Language. So the easy way, and the obvious way, if you want to be, do the same thing, expect the same results. Basically, you're looking for VCE English Language quotes, Quizlet, those kind of things. But of course, you'll be looking at other people's content. It's not necessarily as relevant to your examples as you might like it to be, but it's the first port of call. Keeping in mind, of course, you're trying to memorize these quotes, so shorter is better. If they, rhyme, have the rule of threes, if there's something sort of memorable about them, that would be good. So of course, you've got your Quizlets, and you're probably thinking some of these might be too long. You might want to cut them down, pull out the important parts. And obviously, you're trying to link these to your actual examples. But what I think is really good, just type in something like books about language, or probably not linguistics itself. Linguistics books probably is a little bit too advanced for what you're looking for as a VCE student. But basically, have a scroll through, find some books that are about language. And what you can then do is type the title or the author or both, or do a quick Google search, books about language popular. Again, you don't really have to go into scholarly articles unless you really want to show off. But have a look through here. Are any of these kind of jumping out as you as sort of, oh, that's interesting. I want an example about metaphors, lingo, the development of the words. Some of them are more boring than others because the internet's really good. By Gretchen Mculloch, it's not that long, not that old, so it's quite contemporary. David Crystal, anything he does, of course, is amazing. But you're just looking for books. And then what you do is Goodreads collects quotes from books. So you're picking, for example, this is through the language glass. I always autocorrect what it's meant to be the same. So this is Guy Ducher, I guess you pronounce it, through the language glass. So I've typed into Google through the language glass quotes, and then Goodreads sort of collects them for you. So these are obviously other people have done them and they can be liked and so on. Some of them in other languages, but you found a book. In an ideal world, you'd read the whole book, and then you'd be fully informed about what you're talking about. Linguist Quotes, similar approach in Goodreads, just a whole bunch of them. You probably want to double check that they're actually linguists. Some of these are just authors, for example, talking about language, which you can still use, but obviously Linguist Quotes are best when they're from linguists. The conversation is a really good place to do where academics do that sort of bridging between the academic writing that happens typically behind paywalls and sort of popular, making it available for other people, the actual public. So if you just search for linguistics or Australian language or something like that, and then sort by newest or relevant, you could also search for, slang, in-group solidarity, these are all real academic terms that you could search for. Internet language, teen speak, generation, Gen Z, those sort of things you could all look into and explore. Some of your go-to should be someone like Howard Manns from Monash. Basically, if you type in his name and podcast, go to his Twitter, find examples from there. He's currently studying slang use in Australia, for example. Similarly, a bit of a Wikipedia. These are some linguists from Australia. You want to kind of try and find some that you think are really good and work from there is the idea. But your job is sort of, if someone says to you, who are your favorite linguists, you want to have at least 3 or 4 that come to mind, and ideally have quotes to back them up, of course. You go to podcasts about linguists. So some are, as with all podcasts, some of these have got, haven't posted for years, or, dodgy and, are dead. They made 2 episodes and stopped. The ones that jump out especially, Lingthusiasm is really good. History of English was better for Year 11. Vocal Fry, Because Language is really good fun. Spectacular Vernacular. And there's one by the Macquarie Dictionary that's really good as well. But they only really post towards the end of the year when they do their word of the year. So the conversation's really good for that because you're trying to bridge the academic and the public sphere, and that's something you're trying to do as well in your writing. So again, Howard Manns, very famous. You're just basically shortlisting linguists, trying to find ones that are, peppy, relevant. Podcasts, of course. You can just do a news search for Australian language, for Australian slang. Obviously, you'll be preparing paragraphs about each of those things, so you'll be putting in highly specialized kind of language, jargon, Australian language, slang, etc. Do the same in the conversation. And again, you're seeing what I'm hoping that doing these sort of processes is giving you is you're seeing hopefully some of the same names and you're thinking, okay, I'm starting to see what's going on here. And again, everyone has a profile. It's probably not really important that you memorize what university they're from or anything, but that kind of gives you a bit of a context of, since you are looking at a pathway into wherever you want to be, universities might be playing a role in that or not. And of course, you're going articles and you're looking for the newest ones. And again, it doesn't really matter if they're that old, but Aussie slang, gendered language, you can see kind of how this relates very closely to the course. Maybe even names for Unit 4, Area of Study 2. Again, I've just searched for linguists in the conversation. And again, some people have a lot of articles, some people have less. As a general rule, if they have more, that makes it easier for you. That probably means they're a bit more prominent, or at least a bit more public facing. Again, having to dig around. Howard Manns, similarly. And if they're co-authors, of course, all of these authors are hyperlinked, so you're control clicking and jumping off to them and seeing what they're writing about. And again, you sort of want to be looking at your meta-language list or your study design or your notes and kind of going through and saying, okay, where can I make connections? Where can I make links? So again, another Australian linguist, and only one article for this particular author. It doesn't mean they're not well published elsewhere, but you can jump onto their Twitter, see what they're writing about, tweeting about, those sort of things. Gretchen Mculloch's really good, an American-based linguist, but her book is called Because Internet, so that's really good for your sort of internet speak. And again, you can see some of the same things coming up. Twitter is popular, Goodreads is another great place for quotes, etc., etc. Amanda Montell is a feminist linguist, so if you're looking for things about gender, her book Word Slut is good for that, and she wrote a book Cultish about cults and how they work, and from a sort of a linguist perspective. So again, you could, set up your own a dummy Twitter or Instagram account, follow a whole bunch of linguists in the lead up to the exam, and kind of have that as a place that you go looking for fresh content. Even especially on the day of the exam, you really want to be looking for content that day, because again, that's the sort of thing you want to prove that you are in the world and of the world, and you're not just pulling examples from a quick VCE English Language quotes search and bringing out David Crystal quotes from 20, 30 years ago. You want to be doing something a bit different and trying to be contemporary, and show that you've actually made a connection to the course rather than just done the same as everyone else. That's a good thing, of course, about English language. You're not just quoting Macbeth from 100 years ago, thousands of years probably. You can be talking about things that happened quite recently. So Google Scholar is probably a bit too far. If you really want to go to the extremes, you could. So I've clicked since 2022 because I'm looking for the most recent research. Linguistics research is perhaps, and some of them, basically what you're looking for is this right-hand side. If it has a PDF, then it's easy to access. You can see for me, as an alumni/staff of Uni Melbourne, I can access it through there. You don't have that, of course. So if it doesn't have this PDF on the right-hand side, then you're just pretending it doesn't exist and clicking through. Aboriginal Australian English would be a good thing to type into Google Scholar. And again, you're not necessarily reading the entire article that someone has written, but keeping in mind linguistics articles are not as complicated as some others. So, if we click on one, we can have a quick squiz, but you can see that they're not always super long. You've got an abstract and it's trying to log me in, etc. And, this one doesn't look very useful for us, but these are the kind of processes you can be applying to find things out. As I mentioned, the Macquarie Dictionary podcast, you can see it hasn't posted for a while, since December 2021. So we might be looking at that a bit closer to the exam and hoping that they have one out for us ready to go. David Crystal, as I've mentioned a couple of times, he's sort of the original. Stephen Pinker as well, sort of some of the original kind of linguists. You probably might be more useful to look at Australian ones. So Kate Burridge is the first one that comes up, so she's doing a great job getting her name and her work out there. But again, click on a person, Pam Peters, what has she written? Let's find her Twitter, let's see what book she's written, style guide, grammar. You might think, okay, what does this relate to? Formal language, informal language. It's obviously your job to be making those links, but just a whole bunch of different approaches you can take to finding really good examples. And probably the only one I haven't mentioned is you might want to look for, type in a name of a linguist that you found and go to podcast. And again, you're probably looking for more recent is better, but sit down with a pen or get a transcript for the podcast and pick out some quotes you think are really important. And all of these strategies should help you out to kind of make that work and make your examples and your linguist quotes a little bit more interesting than just a quick, easy Quizlet that you stole from someone else.